Today we're going to talk about another power pick for the upcoming 2015 League of Legends World Championship. This time it's going to be Twisted Fate in the mid lane. Now almost all the teams going into the tournament play Twisted Fate, and the only ones that have not or haven't played him in the past couple of months are Pain Gaming, Bangkok Titans, and LGD. I'm not entirely sure why Bangkok Titans or Pain Gaming haven't played him recently or in the past couple of months, but for LGD, their mid laner is a very talented player with a good champion pool against Twisted Fate, with the likes of Diana, Kassadin, and Yasuo, and a couple of other picks that are more niche. Definitely has a good pool to deal with Twisted Fate, not only in the laning phase, but also trying to following the champion around. Now, the strengths of the champion are quite a bit, and this is a champion that has never really left the meta. And the reason being that he's so strong is because he's super skill dependent. So somebody that's really bad at the champion isn't going to get a lot done, but somebody that's really good at him is going to just be fantastic. Now, the best Twisted Fate of all time, I think it's pretty easy to say that it was Messiah from World Leader a while ago, and it is important to note that Twisted Fate is not just required to be played by somebody that's mechanically sound, somebody that can really pull off those gold cards consistently. It is a team effort. And just a little side note, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but the way that the cards cycle is, I believe, called in metronome order. So if I remember the order correctly, it's red, blue, yellow, and it's about half a second, maybe a second between each card. So when you press your pick a card, it hovers one color, then the other one, then the other one. Well, a little trick that you can do is actually count in your mind the next card, even if you don't have the pick a card press. So for instance, I do my pick a card, and then I see the cycle red, blue, yellow. I select yellow, and then I keep counting, and the pick a card already starts going off cooldown, and it's red, blue, yellow, and I count in my head red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, blue, yellow, and by the time I reach yellow, I could close my eyes, double tap W, which is the pick a card, and I'm gonna insta lock a yellow card without knowing what card was coming in order, because it follows that pattern even when the spell is off cooldown. It's kind of a neat trick and really hard to pull off, but if you can practice it, say during a team fight, during moments that you don't need that much focus, it can prove to be extremely valuable. Anyways, we're back on the point of Twisted Fate having to be a team effort. So picking the champion is something that really unifies the team, and you have to work as a unit in terms of understanding, hey, Twisted Fate is level 6. Let's try to create opportunities for him. Or hey, Twisted Fate has just gone missing. That means that the enemy doesn't have sight of him. We can play a little bit more aggressive, and the enemy will have to let us play aggressive. They won't be able to retaliate because TF is missing and they don't know which lane he's going to hit. So it's something that's it really requires a lot of coordination from the teams, but when pulled successfully, it can be extremely devastating. If Twisted Fate pushes a wave, goes into hiding, pushes a wave, goes into hiding, pushes a wave, and then ganks, the pattern is so unbearable with pressure that the enemy team just wants to end it already. Like lane swap, do something that just stops this from happening. So it's a really powerful pick for that. His laning is also rather good right now because he can have a variety of summoner spells. Now usually the ones that you see are either the Ghost Flash, which make him kind of hard to gank. Ganking somebody that has such long range wave clear, good crowd control, and so much mobility can prove to be difficult to abuse during the lane. On top of the fact that he can also take teleport. So flash teleport is also a really common one, making his presence in the mid lane even stronger so he doesn't necessarily have to lose a tower when he goes for a Destiny gank. Now, besides that, the builds that he has really allow him to survive in lane. So there is basically two builds that people take. Either you go with a flat AP with anything from a fiendish codex or a needlessly large rod or a grail or a lichbane, pretty much anything, just a regular AP item maybe even an Abyssal at some point. But the other one is the cooldown reduction boot home guard rush, meaning that you just push the wave, take a little bit of harass, because that's usually how people try to punish Twisted Fate. You take a little bit of harass, you recall home guard back into the lane, don't lose a lot of tower damage, in fact, almost none at all, especially if you take teleport with that build. And to top things off, a lot of the times running back into the lane like that will win you the laning phase because you're always topped off with health, always have more potions. So it makes his lane difficult to abuse. It usually needs a lot of coordinated pressure. Just how you need a lot of coordination to work with the champion, you need a lot of coordination to work against him. He has great CC, which usually also forces either cleanses from the enemy team. So usually the mid laners will have to take cleanse because it's very risky if you're playing against a Twisted Fate and he has a heavy ganking jungler like a Rek'Sai, maybe an Evelynn, and you don't have cleanse, you're very susceptible to things like a level 2 ghost gold card burning your flash and it comes back for a return gank, or just flash on top of you with a gold card, the jungler comes around and you're dead, and during any stage of the game that can happen. So a lot of times the mid laners are forced to take cleanse against Twisted Fate, on top of the fact that top laners, junglers, supports maybe even have to take Mercury Treads, a little bit more expensive, may not necessarily be the most ideal item for combat stats. Supports have to rush Crucibles, people have to buy Quicksilver sashes, and if you run a team comp that's primarily physical damage, with the exception of TF being the only magic, it really boosts the amount of damage that your team can deal because you're forcing such a heavy magic resist itemization out of everybody else. And of course, he also has fantastic wave clear, as we all know. A good wild cards can thin out the wave, and you can probably chuck 2 at it before the wave really settles into the tower while suffering minimal tower damage. And if you have anybody else to help you, it's very difficult to push against him. And of course, the obvious one. He's a split pusher. Not many other split pushers remain in the game that are played in the mid lane. The only ones that really come to mind right now are the Dianas and the Yasuos. Those are really the 2 most popular split pushers right now. And both of them don't offer as much of a global presence, even with the teleport, because Twisted Fate can obviously be there at any time. Speaking of being there at any time, a good reason why people like to play Twisted Fate is that when you're in such an important tournament, there's a lot of scouting going on. So you have tons of analysts doing heavy research on teams and really trying to understand the patterns that some of these teams play under and see if there's anything that they can exploit or abuse. So for instance, really common patterns are supports getting caught out warding by themselves, or top laners staying, or AD carries staying a little bit too long in their lanes by themselves, trying to get that extra farm. So something like that is something that a team can scout and decide this would be a good pick for us because of the global presence. We can pick the person going in here and really punish them for their overextension without respecting the Twisted Fate. On top of that, if a team is at any time looking to run a split push strategy, Twisted Fate is a fantastic pick against that. Particularly now with the rise of the juggernauts, a lot of these champions can be very fit to split push. So for instance, not many people can 1v1 a Fiora and Olaf or Darius. They build a lot of damage too and are really tanky. So they can a lot of times just sit at the tower ignoring the other top laner and really wailing down on it. And that's a strategy that can be punished very easily if you have a Twisted Fate that at any time can just pour it into it and really shut down that split push presence. Also applies to teams that really need their top laners to get ahead. In the coming tournament, you're going to find that a lot of these teams really put a lot of their eggs in the top lane basket, particularly with the teleport plays. You shut down the teleport, then you shut down plays in the bottom lane. That's why a lot of people like to go into the top lane. You get your top laner ahead, you give him TP advantage while the opponent does not have it, and now you've created a bigger opportunity in the bot lane for getting a 4-man play that will likely net you 1, 2 towers, more kills, and probably a dragon. That's why it is really important to shut down the top laner, and Twisted Fate is a fantastic pick for doing that. He can also snowball the bot lane right from the get-go very well with the two of the most common AD carries right now as well. So you have the Kalista and the Vayne. These champions can really snowball out of control if played properly and if put enough pressure into them. They have a lot of overwhelming strength. Similar to Twisted Fate, he can be either useless or extremely overwhelming. And when you pick a team composition that all kind of fits the same pattern and you play as a team, it creates a really strong strategy that if the enemy team is unprepared or unwilling to counter at every step of the way, it will result in a fantastic victory for whoever's playing it. And a good example of that actually is the regional final video that I brought up in the last video as well, regional final game, pardon, of EDG versus Snake. Now the team composition that they ran was Olaf top, Rek'Sai jungle, Twisted Fate mid lane with Kalista and Braum. So right from the get-go, think about all the points that I've mentioned. An all AD composition, so you got the Rek'Sai, the Olaf, and the Kalista, with only one source of magic damage, but Twisted Fate with the Rek'Sai is enough CC that the mid lane Victor, who was playing against Twisted Fate, was forced to take Cleanse. So right off the bat, he's already one summoner spell down, which could have really allowed him to bully the laning phase. So doesn't have a summoner spell yet. People are having to buy Merctress. People are having to buy QSSs and Crucibles, and it really just slowed down the tankiness of the enemy team in surviving against such a heavy physical lineup like Kalista, the Rek'Sai, and the Ola, that it really just slows things down for the enemy team, and they have to play extremely careful. And the thing that I particularly loved about that game was the fact that EDG had, I believe, like a 900 gold lead, and at 7 minutes, now bear in mind, at 7 minutes, they make one play ball in the first play of the game, and it swings 3k over, and they end up at almost 4,000 gold up in one play at 3 minutes. And it's the same thing over and over with the teleports, with the Twisted Fate ultimates. Just these plays that they make just have these huge amounts of net worth for them that is so hard to deal with, especially that early, that it makes the game so enjoyable, at least for that part. And particularly, I don't necessarily enjoy having these really close games. I just enjoy seeing games that have a really high level of thought and just precision to what the teams are doing. And that was really one of them that I think that I would want to see other teams execute with Twisted Fate, and it's a really common strategy that we see a lot. Other teams have done it in other regions to decent success as well. The one that comes to mind as well is one game I believe where Fnatic ran in the regular season, where they had a Twisted Fate, and a Riven, and what they did was they shut down the opposing Rumble. So they picked a counter pick Riven into Rumble with the Twisted Fate and really shut down that Rumble so hard that at one point, Rumble can't even defend under tower by himself, even at the base turrets, making his life completely impossible and really just snowballing from the laning phase. And that's kind of what you want from that pick. A weakness of the champion, though, these are a lot of the strengths since it has quite a few, especially since the stun can be maxed and goes up to 2 seconds, which is pretty ridiculous. Not many champions have such lengthy crowd control. Is that the champion can be abused in lane, believe it or not. If played properly and if with the correct picks, Twisted Fate can really fall behind. And a common pick that we see against him is things like an Azir. Now there's two ways of going about it. You pick a matchup that can just kill him flat out and really just keep him at bay because he's scared of even laning. But that pick may not necessarily work a lot of the time because it's a very skill-oriented matchup when you pick something to try to kill him, such as a Fizz, a Yasuo, maybe even a Diana, which is kind of more of a farm fest since you can also have teleports in with the Kassadin. But champions like Fizz and the Yasuo can be very effective, but they have to be played extremely well. So those are the ones that I don't particularly like to try those if I was the one playing against Twisted Fate. But the ones that seem to have worked the most are when people pick like a Victor or an Azir and really pour all their pressure into the mid lane. So what I mean by that is that all the vision has to be in the mid lane and all the focus has to be in controlling both blue buffs. So you keep your mid laner having both blues at alternating times, making him able to perma push and really just keep Twisted Fate under his tower at all times and keep the jungler at that position as well, because if you keep them pushed, it's a lot harder to win that 2v2 if you're on the Twisted Fate side trying to collapse on them when they have a minion wave advantage and trying to pressure the tower first. So you got to remember that the ulti range is not global. In fact, he can't actually move from the outer turret to the other outer turrets in any of the lanes. He has to walk quite a bit, almost towards the ramp entrances, to actually get a gank going. So by taking down the first tower first versus TF, you push him back, making the distance that he has to walk to take a gank much larger. So pressuring the mid lane and really confining him to closer and closer into his base makes it so that the champion has a much harder time getting a play off. But the problem with playing against him, and why nobody ever likes playing against Twisted Fate, and that's why we usually see the champion banned after a team plays him one time, is that you have to be extremely diligent on the champion if the team is ready to play the champion well, the Twisted Fate, and is really looking to counter the vision around mid lane and the pressure on around the mid lane. So you have to always be on top of your game. You have to contest every single blue. You have to call every single MIA. You have to always play defensive when he's off the map, and every single moment matters, because if you slip up once, he TPs down there, and just like the example I gave you, bam, a play for 3k swing happens and you're fucked. And the problem is that the champion, it's even hard to shut down in lane because he gets extra gold from his passive. So even if he falls down maybe 20 CS in the long scheme of things, around 100 CS, that won't even matter because the gold is evened out by his passive, making him such a strong pick in the laning phase, allowing him to fall behind, and let alone if he gets ahead. I mean, even in CS, the farm difference is going to be monumental. So that's kind of the strategies that people want to do against him, and it can just be extremely obnoxious to try to deal with him, and that's why he's such a strong pick, because it really forces the opponent's hand. Think about it like playing against an Evelynn. You have to be so diligent and so careful at every step of the way, maintaining pain cords, really tracking her, really calling your MIAs, letting the team know that, hey, this Evelynn could be anywhere. Hey, I just spotted her around this side of the map, and it would take her maybe 20 seconds to go to the other side. You're gonna have to play back in about 10 or 15 seconds, and nobody really wants to go through all that trouble. It's a lot easier to just ban the champion and think about something else that can really be contained within the lane and won't have such a spillover effect into the other lanes. It's really upsetting for the team morale if you have somebody that is really a better player in the side lane and they can't use their skill or be more aggressive or be better at whatever the matchup is to win the laning phase, because they know that the second that they overstep, Twisted Fate will pour and kill them, making their lives a misery. So it's a really difficult pick to play against, especially with how quickly it can snowball. I'm really excited to see this pick because of the skill required and the diligence that the teams have to be. This is the top tournament of the year, and it is a top level of play. I want to see how the teams learn to counter it and what kind of strategies they've cooked up to really deal with something like this, because trust me, and I would willingly put money on this, that this is a champion that will 100% see play in this tournament. And I think that most of the play will actually come from the bracket stage. The reason being is that it's a pick that during bracket stage can be really used to intimidate the enemy. So you pick the champion in, say, first game, and you have a lot of success with it, you win. Now the enemy team has to consider, do we play our own Twisted Fate strategy? Do we have a Twisted Fate strategy? We really didn't deal with it well the first game. And now they have to permaban it throughout the entire series, making the banning phase a lot harder for the team that just played against them. And that's why he's such a strong pick at that point, because it's a strategy that is revealed in a best of 3 or best of 5 scenario that you have to address, and you just can't ignore, because it can just be played over and over and over, and if one team had difficulty with dealing it, it will be exploited by the next person and the next person. If it gets busted out at group stages, I'd be more expecting to see it in matchups where a team may be classified or may see themselves as an underdog playing against a team of a much higher caliber by statistics, points, or just by looking at them, maybe the players feel like they're just a worse team. It's a pick that can be really taken and take a team that perhaps is thinking, oh, while we're playing against a team that is deemed worse than us, we think that they're worse. We might just play to a TF right now so that we can really bring the aggression to them and kind of catch them off guard. And that's why it's such an interesting pick, because it has so many little different scenarios that can be used to kind of take a leg up on the opponent. The one thing about him, though, is that he is not a good team fighter. He only offers realistically two combat abilities, his Q and his W, while there's many other mages which have way more burst, way more sustained damage, and even more crowd control. Which brings back the point of you have to be very diligent as a team in understanding how to play with the champion and really sticking to the strengths of never really team fighting until you have a humongous lead, but more so going for the outnumber plays. A global ability is used to outnumber and catch people out of position, not to get to the fight at the same time as your opponent. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll probably be trying to make another one for either tomorrow or just try to put out as many as possible that I think are necessary for the upcoming tournament. Unfortunately, because the new patch hasn't been announced, the patch that Worlds is going to be played, there are some champions that I have to hold back on, particularly the Juggernauts, maybe even things like Mordekaiser, that you just don't really know where they currently stand in terms of balance and how the teams are prioritizing them. So we're going to have to wait on in some of the videos. Hope you enjoyed this, and have a good day.